Alright, just a bit here and there, and hey, this looks pretty good so far. All that's missing now is the hands. Damn, my worst enemy. Come on, it can't be that hard. If others can do it, why can't I? I just have to focus. Just carefully line after line. Hey, it's going pretty well. And there we go. Hands, no problem for me.
Dude, really? Hey, where you going? Hey, you just gonna leave me like that? Hey, where you going?
We have all been there, haven't we? It has often been requested that I do a video on how to draw hands, which comes to no surprise as struggling with drawing hands is basically a meme at this point. And let me tell you, after drawing characters for over 10 years, I can still find myself struggling with it. But in this video I'll show you some of the different approaches there are so you can try them out and find what works best for you. For this video I've once again teamed up with Concept D, who make creator-focused PCs. They've sent me the Concept D7 Ezel Pro to create the art in this video. More on that later. What I have learned through tutorials is not what I stick to in practice, but I want to still have a little section about it before we dive into my method. So let's draw a simple hand. First, we draw a slightly crooked rectangle, also known as a trapezoid. It is a sketch, so it doesn't have to be too tidy. The longer of the two parallel sides is where we will locate the index finger. So if you want to draw the other hand, just flip it. Then we divide the trapezoid in the middle and use the liquify tool to give the upper line a little bend. The apex should be a little closer to where the index finger will be and not perfectly centered. On this bend is where I add two circles to the left and right of the middle line. Make sure to leave small gaps between the circles. Next we draw three curved lines on top of the circles with an even distance between each other. Think of the Wi-Fi logo. These are our guides for the knuckles. How wide or narrow these curves are determines how spread apart the fingers will be. With four straight lines I pierce through the circles from earlier. The spots where these lines cross the Wi-Fi curves are where I want to put the knuckles. Because we draw 3 joints for every finger, we have to add another 2 circles for each finger on these sections. Now we can draw the fingers. For the thumb I draw a line down from the longer side of the construct where the index finger is located and create a little triangle. Then I can extend the lower line with a slightly curved line to draw the thumb. Lastly, with some cleanup, we can use the straight lines which helped us locate the knuckles to draw the tendons on the back of the hand. And we are done. Now, there are a lot of step-by-step guides that show you how to break a hand down into geometric shapes like this. And that can work really well if you want to draw that specific hand gesture. Also, you get to know certain characteristics, like that there are gaps between each finger or that the palm is slightly rounded. So to draw fingers, you don't want to plant them on a straight line, but a curved one. But if you need something specific for an illustration, or you need to work really quickly because a new comic page is due, it hardly helps that you know how to draw a default pose. If you rotate the hand, lift fingers or change the perspective, it would take an endless amount of step-by-step tutorials to break down each pose to its constructing elements. And keeping them all in mind while drawing can also become a little impractical. Don't get me wrong though, I appreciate these kinds of tutorials. I used to use them a lot when I started drawing, and I needed to get some guidance on how to even approach drawing a hand. But every time I wanted to draw something freely, even though I have read so many tutorials on drawing hands, I still couldn't come up with one, for example when I needed a different angle. Now, after years of practice, I have drawn quite the amount of hands in my life, and I am somewhat able to draw a solid looking pose from scratch. There are certain hand positions and gestures that I kind of know by heart, because I assume they are the ones that I've drawn over and over again, that it only takes a rough shape for me to fill in the blanks. It kind of is intuition, I think, but still it looks pretty rough. And if I had to draw a hand straight from the side, for example, which I have done so rarely, I would absolutely mess it up. I probably would have to look up a tutorial myself to get that done. Or I use that secret technique that most artists use when they don't know how to draw a specific thing off the top of their head. I use references, and with hands, that comes down to photos of my own hands. I want to show you a proper way of how you can work with them to be able to draw any hand you want. To take reference pictures of your own hand, all you need is the camera of your phone, laptop, or any other camera you have at your disposal. Make sure to point a light at your hand, ideally from behind the camera, to make sure it is nicely lit. Here you can already observe how much the hand changes depending on pose, position and perspective. For example, notice how the tendons on the thumb shift depending on whether the thumb is spread or closed. If you're not sure yet what kind of hand pose you'll need, just experiment and take some snapshots. It can also help to work with mirrors to achieve good reference material. Just like any photo shoot, the more pics you take, the higher the chance you'll find something usable in there. Just have a look through your collection and pick your faves. With the photo chosen, we can use it as reference directly, or in case we have a more specific image of the pose in mind, we can further adjust the photo with the liquify tool. For example, you can transform the fingers a bit to amplify the foreshortening effect. Just be careful to not create something that looks unnatural. Or you can make the fingers slimmer or wider, accentuate the knuckles in case they are not visible enough. I would recommend using liquify to adjust your reference in case you happen to have large hands, but you need to draw the hand of a child, for example. It's always a good idea to apply a few tweaks here and there. Alright, here I have a bunch of photos of my hand that can serve as my reference. First up, let's get the obvious question out of the way. Can you simply trace the reference? Let's try it and see what happens. I put the photo on a layer, lower the opacity and carefully trace the lines that I can make out. After all, this should leave us with a perfect and anatomically correct hand, shouldn't it? Well, yes and no. Technically speaking, yes. The hand is naturalistic. It has 5 fingers, and if we were to fill it with more detail, we could recreate the photo to a perfect copy. But what do we need to draw the hand for? Typically, the lineart of a traced hand just looks weird. A bit clunky and rough. It looks like a hand but doesn't really fit our drawing, and it can be quite easily spotted that it's traced. For drawings and paintings, we want to make adjustments that you can't get with tracing. So in principle the answer is yes, of course you can trace your reference, but it won't look as good. What we can do to change that is to use the reference as you would actually use any other reference. That means that we will put it on the screen and figure out how to transfer it onto our canvas through mere observation. When I use references like this, I already try to simplify certain features. It is a sketch after all, and I can change everything at any time. I am making an effort to stay true to the volume of the palm and fingers. And if there's any overlapping, for example, you can imagine the fingers as tubes. Another thing you want to watch out for are the proportions. This is where working with the reference photo becomes really helpful. Make sure that all fingers are equally thick. It also helps to work with the position of the fingernails. As we have nothing to trace, we are more open to mistakes obviously, and often we will have to redraw areas. But we also are far more open to doing adjustments, maybe changing the length of the finger, maybe making the hand slimmer and such. Of course, using reference is harder than plainly tracing the photo, and you will need at least some practice or experience to get satisfying results. With the sketch done, let's talk about stylization. By only using the reference for drawing the hand, we now have a good base to work with, and often it can already be used for the artwork. But depending on how close you stuck to the reference, it can still look a bit stiff. Especially in the context of your art style, we want to make it look consistent, and that is where we can personalize the sketch through exaggerations. So I lower the opacity of my sketch, and just like when doing line art, I trace the lines. This time I don't spend as much focus on making it anatomically correct though, but I want to make it look more cartoonish, more like a drawing. And there are multiple ways to achieve that. An easy one is varying the thickness of the lines. In cases of foreshortening, for example, making the line art thicker the closer the finger reaches to the viewer makes it look more dynamic and believable. Another method could be to simplify the hand, removing the details for the joints, or maybe you simply leave out the fingernails. Also, enhancing the curves or knuckles can add to a different look. There really is a lot you can work with to make drawing hands personalized. So let's get to the example. I have prepared something, and what's missing is the hand obviously. So first we want to create the right reference photo. To take the matching picture for a drawing, we must first ask ourselves what hands we actually need. How is the perspective? From what angle are we looking at it? Is the hand reaching out to us, or is it pointing away? Is there foreshortening? And what does the pose look like? I take my phone and roughly estimate a matching perspective by checking the drawing constantly. Then I take some pictures with minor shifts in the pose and angle. Then I pick one of the images and open them in Clip Studio. I use the lasso tool to copy the hand and paste it onto my drawing. Next I figure out the right size with the transform function, and as I want to have more of that foreshortening effect, where the character is reaching to the viewer, I use the liquify tool to enhance the fingers and to add more dynamic in general. When I'm satisfied, I put the photo to the side, to use it as my reference. On a new layer I begin to sketch the fingers. As this pose has a strong perspective, I want to nail them first. But of course you can start with whatever you want, maybe the rough shape of the palm or the thumb. I constantly look at the reference and try to do the sketch in proportion to it. Things like the gaps between the fingers or the distance between each joint. With Liquify I can push and tweak the elements accordingly. But I also like to go off the path in certain areas, like the middle finger, because I feel it would look better as a silhouette if the fingertip was slightly bent to the right. There often comes a point when you work with references where you notice when it limits you and you start experimenting with variations and shifts to match the drawing better to your needs. The Transform and Liquify tools help with that a lot, as we don't have to erase every single line. Instead we can just play a bit with what we already have drawn, such as making the hand more narrow or changing the thumb position. Another tip that I can give you is to also pay attention to the silhouette. To help with that and also have the shape more visible, you can create a new layer underneath your sketch. Simply fill the inside of the sketch with white color by selecting the outside of your sketch and then inverting that selection to use the bucket tool. After merging them into one layer, it might be easier to spot some flaws. In my case, there are some issues around the middle finger and arm, for example. A few pushes with Liquify until I think everything looks right, and I can extract my lines again by using the Convert Brightness to Opacity function that you can find under Edit. Only some final tweaks are left, and we can continue with the line art. As I said when I talked about stylization, we can use the process of drawing the line art as an opportunity to match the sketch to our drawing even more by leaving out details or playing with line thickness and stuff like that. In my case, I think the sketch already comes close to what I need, so I can trace the main parts of it without changing too much. I skipped some details for the joints, as the style is more semi-realistic and I want to enhance them with my use of color later, rather than with lines. Overall, I try to keep the lines pretty thin and also make sure that they have the right curve to them, so that they have a clean look which matches the rest of the artwork. When that is done, I create a selection of the hand again and fill it with a flat color. The final step is to adjust the position and size of the hand one last time. Because this is the step before coloring starts, you want to make sure everything works as you planned it. So in my case, I want the index finger to cover one eye to add some mystery. But it shouldn't look like I was just too lazy to draw the second eye. As you can see, I clearly wasn't. So I want to leave enough of it visible, so the viewer can fill in the gap while also enjoying his cold glare through his fingers. By the way, I've been working with the Concept D7 Ezel Pro for the past few weeks now, and it holds up pretty well, no matter what task I throw at it. And the pen is totally equipped for that. It's really light and handy, almost weightless, which is awesome for longer drawing sessions as it does not strain your wrists too much. But it feels really smooth to glide over the screen while also having full control. As it doesn't require batteries, there's no time wasted waiting for it to recharge, because it works with EMR technology. Through the pen pressure sensitivity, I just get the right amount of precision for my drawing, and I really enjoy that detail in particular. When I'm done with my drawing, I can just put it back in the laptop, so there's no way I can lose it. And this is it. We have drawn the hand with a custom-made reference, and with some color, it really integrates well with our drawing. As you've seen, having a reference for the exact pose you're trying to draw is extremely, well, handy. And if you're still unsure about using references in general, be it through photos or using 3D models as I've explained in previous videos, I say give it a shot. For some people the use of references is surprisingly controversial, but you've seen that they aren't even the magic bullet these people make it out to be. Otherwise this video would have been over after our first attempt at tracing the hand. So, how do you approach drawing hands? Do you try to construct them from base shapes? Or do you use various references? Let me know in the comments. Thanks again to Concept D for sponsoring this video, as well as my Patreon supporters. See you in the next video.